Okay. Can you all see that all right? Got a thumbs up? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see so many folks in the webinar Zoom room. I'm Diana Marsh. I'm an assistant professor in archives and digital curation here at the University of Maryland in College Park on Piscataway Nacotchtank land.
And my name is Abigail Hardy. I am a member of the Monacan Indian Nation, and I am a current MLIS student focusing on archives and digital curation at the University of Maryland, College Park.
So today we're going to talk about some of the indigenized snack history and how it got started, some of its early motivations. We'll talk about the IMLS funded grant that's just closed out. And Abby will talk us through the incredible work of the Indigenous Description Group over the last 2 years. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of our next phase and future work. So we'll start with some project background.
So potentially, SNAC offers a number of important departures from traditional archival description that might benefit Native and Indigenous community search, access, and use. It accommodates descriptive flexibility, allowing for editors to create their own authority records that fit Indigenous needs while potentially using culturally appropriate descriptive terminologies. And unlike the Library of Congress or other standard authority files that require bureaucratic approval processes and have been based wholly in a colonial model, and Wikipedia entries, which require a certain level of notoriety to be approved by the wiki community, SNAC allows editors to create new authorities essentially at will and then link those authorities to relevant historical sources and archival collections around the world. That in turn may allow for the focus on Indigenous people, communities, or entities represented in collections that are often hierarchically organized by or held within the collections of a white collector or creator. And lastly, SNAC allows for Indigenous community members and allies to be trained as in work as editors through the cooperative model, so people who know the content, understand its complexity, and attendant ethical standards can be the ones creating and editing records.
So the motivation for a lot of this work started before I was involved. Huge kudos to Ray Gates and Catherine Satriano for starting off the first ever editathon in SNAC, but also to Jennifer O'Neill and Michael Pond and Jerry for thinking through ways SNAC might be used for Indigenous work prior to that. The previous editathons in 2020 and 2021 kind of set some design and priority setting for a lot of the work that has come since. In particular, in 2021, we organized an editathon with an Indigenous advisory board. We crafted a whole series of protocols and drafted the first descriptive guide to entity representation for Indigenous description in SNAC, and did sort of like a wider set of calls for Indigenous representation and participation in the platform. Next slide. Building on that momentum, we received an IMLS grant to look more broadly at SNAC for Indigenous representation and search, and again, sort of records unification, reunification across various institutions and platforms. And that team included an amazing group of advisory board members. We've had a number of folks here at UMD work on this project, including names you'll see here who've been here today, now taking on more leadership roles in the SNAC Cooperative, which is wonderful. We had excellent archival consultants in the project. And then, of course, at the start of the project, we're working closely with our NARA colleagues and then colleagues at other institutions who help us think through institutional partnerships. Next slide. The main kind of research methods for the grant were focus group discussions. So those were led by EAPL and included, started with Indigenous participants in previous editathons. So folks really familiar with SNAC and sort of the affordances and limitations. Indigenous lamb and glam professionals, so folks kind of in the field, Indigenous students, kind of up and coming junior scholars and MLIS students and aspiring archivists. And then finally, just recently, we finished the last focus group discussion with Indigenous community members who are interested in archival research, doing archival research, but have never heard of this thing called SNAC, to sort of talk about what the potentials are and what limitations are at present. We also worked on sort of retooling Snack School to fit Indigenous interests and needs, and did community outreach, a lot of which you heard bits and pieces come through the outreach group. And then wider sort of snack policy work. So again, working through that editorial guide and a lot of the work that the Indigenous description group has been doing. Next slide. In the focus group discussions, we now have some preliminary findings, although again, we've just done the last set, so we've got more to come, but there's a lot of interest in this kind of like rogue cataloging, right? This idea that we can be doing more flexible cataloging, but also in SNAC as a cataloging training tool. So for folks who are interested in learning how to do cataloging or sort of basic cataloging and archival cataloging principles, it's quite useful for that. And actually, we've just tested that out with my Introduction to Archives and Digital Curation students recently as well. It's been great for sort of wider descriptive work. And again, that sort of like vision of shared description and to bridge different institutional systems. And we've had kind of a little bit of a full circle where folks in the focus group discussions were interested in SNAC for repatriation research, which was one of the goals that Irene and Catherine had envisioned at the very start in the first edit-a-thon. So that's been really great to sort of hear about from different perspectives. Some limitations, obviously the more generalized a data model, the less culturally responsive it is. And so we're always in this like tension around how to do maximally responsive description while also allowing records and searching to be interoperable and pan-institutional. So a lot of interest in more community tailored and community to community approaches. And then as we were just speaking about with things like place names, there's a really long laundry list of possible ways to improve Indigenous representation in the platform, including through especially place names and subjects, because the platform relies on the Library of Congress subject headings. And as folks know, the library is doing fantastic work through their task group, some of whose members are on our project now working with us to revise the subject headings. But that's a very long process. And so we're really interested in sort of like emergent vocabularies that we can incorporate into the platform. Then there's also some like broader would float all boats kinds of things around some of the user interface issues in the landing page and some stuff like that. So we have lots of hopes and dreams and a long list of work for us over the next many years. Next slide. Some overall broad grant outputs. We have a bit of a proof of concept through having really nicely described and through some of those edit-a-thons, different historical Indigenous figures and trying out some of the Indigenous scripts and variant names and things like that. And again, a very long kind of wish list for things we'd like to do in the future. Next slide. And then through that kind of community of practice around this, we were able to do a ton of trainings, workshops, training workshops, professional presentations, publications, and of course the editorial guide, a manual. So, and then in addition to that, of course, the video series that Scotty was mentioning. So just tons of outputs through the grant. And that's also with the termination of the grant last April and its reinstatement in July, August. So we had a hiatus on the grant and had to kind of do a lot of inning and outing of the work. So we're just a huge Herculean set of work and outputs through this process. Next slide. And on to you, Abby, on the Indigenous description group.
So in 2023, we launched the IDG as a part of an IMLS grant with the goal for this to be a sustainable way to keep working on these issues beyond the grant, and they have. So modeled after SNAC's enslaved description group, the Indigenous description group is a part of the SNAC governance and works with the editorial and standards working group to inform, guide, monitor, and address specific needs for the Indigenous descriptions in SNAC. In addition to their formation, the Indigenous Description Group outlined its top priorities, including expanding language pick lists, describing boarding schools, which was a core parallel effort for records location, better representation of tribal nations as entities in the platform, and relationship types based on RIC standard at the back end of SNAC. Recently, we have worked with the firm Simple Thread to ingest the ISO 6393 as a new, more expansive language pick list. We've also built a formal partnership with the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition and worked on a data set for preferred names of tribal nations, which our colleague Veronica Pipestem will discuss momentarily. The goal has been to create a corporate body entry for every federally recognized tribal nation in SNAC and utilize preferred names as sovereign tribal nations. While we are aware of limitations, we started with federally recognized tribal nations, and those have been recently ingested. Additionally, we are working with the Enslaved Description Group to coordinate efforts in developing relationship types to be more accurate and describe relationships between entities in SNAC. A subgroup has been updating the editorial guide to release a 2.0 version, incorporating these changes and fleshing out more guidance on specific fields and terminologies. And now back to you, Diana.
And I'll add one other tidbit there, which is that folks in Europe or folks kind of following the International Congress, the ICA, the RIC standard is now being adopted more broadly there. And so the expert group on Indigenous matters there is very interested in our work thinking through the RIC standard and how it might be tailored to Indigenous needs. So we're excited about some international collaboration on that. Next slide. So one of the hugest outputs of the IDG has been grant proposals. So this group of folks listed down at the bottom of the slide here met once a month, but then there were all kinds of co-working meetings weekly and even more often in the past year and a half to put together an NEH grant, which we did receive, but unfortunately was almost immediately terminated. So we'll see if that ever comes back into play. But we also received really generous funding from the Mellon Foundation to pursue a much wider swath of work in this vein. And so we're very, very grateful to have that support and to be able to continue our work, and to the IDG for essentially co-writing these grant proposals, which is, for folks who've worked on grants, it's a huge amount of work. We're very grateful to our collaborators at the UVA libraries, including John Unsworth and Sarah Wells, Brenda Gunn, Robbie Hott, who you'll hear from later, who's come on as our lead technical consultant, to our colleague Veronica Pipestem for her work in project design, and to my colleague Shelby Novelette-Meissner, who's joined as co-PI here, who runs the Indigenous Futures Lab here and just does an amazing amount of work, and is going to be leading up Indigenous evaluation methods for the next phase. Next slide. And in that vein, I'm not sure who all is here, but if you are here, I believe Adriana Cutler is here. If you'd like to introduce yourself, we have new hires who we'd love to introduce.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Cutler. Very excited to be joining this project. I have been sort of watching SNAC from the background for a long time. I was formerly at the National Endowment for the Humanities and have been paying attention to your work for a bit since about 2010. So just really excited to be joining this project on this side, and really excited to be able to help move more of the indigenizing SNAC work along in the future. So great to meet you all.
Fabulous. I'll pass it to Agoma next, if you want to introduce yourself with your new hat.
Hi, everyone. Yes. Again, I'm Agoma Smoke. I'm the metadata specialist for the IndigenizeSTAR project. I hold a master's degree in library information with a focus in archives, special collections, museum studies, and digital preservation. I bring in more than 10 years experience working in libraries, museums with a focus on metadata and genealogy. As previously mentioned, I began working with the Indigenous Description Group in mid-2023. And then also before my current role now as the metadata specialist, I served as the research assistant with working on Native Indigenous archives and linked data. In that role, I collaborated with the Council of the Preservation of Anthropological Records. And yes, it's a mouthful, but COPAR for short. And also I worked with Lotto, where I had the opportunity to work alongside with Diana and Katrina Finland, who are both wonderful.
So, I don't see Mike here, but Mike Preston is going to be our new full-time developer. And given the long list of, again, we keep calling cultural technical upgrades we have wish lists for, we are just over the moon to have that kind of expertise on our team. Mike comes to us from prior work with the Folger Shakespeare Library and a lot of very cool digital humanities and development work in this exact vein. And I don't believe Stephanie Sapienza is with us. I'll double check. But Stephanie is going to be part-time with us, looking at linked data as the linked data coordinator and sort of looking broadly at emergent sort of data models, things that we can learn from out in the world, and other tools and approaches for Indigenous sort of records reclamation and search, and has long been had previously had NEH funding to do a lot of really cool work in SNAC, does a lot of metadata and linked data tooling around in Wikidata and all sorts, and is part of the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities here. So we have an amazing team joining us, and we also have a postdoc joining us very shortly, we hope, as well, to work as well on the evaluation and sort of research side of house. So huge gratitude to everyone for patience, immense patience as we, for folks working in R1 university settings, the last year has been very chaotic. And so we're really grateful for everyone's patience as we got this project off the ground and have our new team here with us. So, hooray. All right, next slide. So the broad goals of the next phase of work are to, again, use Indigenous evaluation methods throughout on the processes of working with these kinds of systems to make some of those cultural technical upgrades, but importantly to partner in all of that with tribal and First Nations archives, because sort of working from the community ground up is going to be extremely important in thinking about what these data models might look like and how we do this work at this kind of interinstitutional level and also in a community way. We are interested in doing documentation around how we sort of make those decisions and have some kind of exemplary archival authority files that kind of come from community settings at the end of it, as well as some guidance on doing some of this thesaurus building and descriptive workflows across communities. And we have goals to also do kind of a really holistic, Indigenous-centered orientation of snack school with Indigenous instructors and et cetera. And then, of course, collaborative co-designed work throughout. Next slide. And we're seeing all of this, you heard Agoma mention, we're seeing all of this as, with huge credit to my colleague Shelby Nawalette-Meissner here at UMD for this name and beautiful design. We're thinking about how this work can be part of wider efforts in Indigenous archival sovereignty. So this is our tentative branding for how we're thinking about that in a broad way: systems transforming archival reclamation, IndigenizeSTAR. So we thought that's also cool with the constellations that SNAC is modeled on. So yeah, a lot of work to come and a lot of excitement about what we can do over the next couple years. Next slide. And finally, this slide is unreadable because there's an enormous number of people who've been working on this project over the last couple of years. All of the members of the IDG. Also, huge thanks to Lydia Curlis, previous GA who worked on a lot of the grant writing, and Amanda Sorensen, Ia Bull, who I mentioned. All of the folks you're seeing here in the room are advisory board members, consultants, all the volunteer editors, our UVA collaborators, and our local colleagues, and then the teams at both at UVA and UMD who've been handling sort of the actual administering of grants and trying to help us do this in a way that is community centered, which is not the default mode of our university settings. So we're just trying to always push the envelope in every way we can to make our work community oriented. So we'll stop there.
Thank you, Diana and Abby. I do see a question in the chat. I'm going to read the second half because it is the actual question. I'm currently working on my first linked open data project. This person is in a linked open data class at University of Alabama. Using I'm just going to say all the letters and numbers here.
It's
XW.
WAWA.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Classification. The linked open data professor with other projects meets with Adolfo Tarango. She asked him about URIs for that classification, and it's great that it's a long-term goal and there's still a lot of work to do. Just curious if there are any connection with those above organizations.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think we have grand goals to work with some of these other thesauri and controlled vocabularies. So that is, I mean, certainly the work that the UBC Indigenous libraries have been doing on both the sort of like BC First Nations and the work they've done on First Nations subject work and classifications. All of that is a huge influence on our thinking and is highly present in all of our grant materials as like aspirations for the ways we might describe things. And of course, right now, those are not things that are available to be used actively in SNAC, but I think that's a top priority to be able to implement those kinds of community developed thesauri. Another is the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis ontology, and the NMAI Culture Thesaurus, which is still in the works. So yes, huge goals for that. And I know that some of our other colleagues who work in the Wikidata space have also been interested in sort of how to adapt other sort of linked data work with those more tailored kinds of data models and thesauri. There is a pretty good draft Wikidata data model that talks a little bit about Indigenous representation, but yeah, I don't know that that those things are fully adopted there. So one of the reasons we're interested in having this linked data piece is that these things are so intertwined in terms of how we can be in this information environment, and so yeah, I think that's something that's on the radar on the Wikidata side as well. I don't know if anyone else in the room wants to answer this question since it's a. Thank you for that question. Really, really great.
Alicia said that they would love to see the draft when that's ready.
Yeah, and I'll also link that if Agoma doesn't beat me to it, the Wikidata model, which I know that our colleague Stacey Allison Casson, who's done a lot of Indigenous Wikidata work, was part of that project. So I'll put that in the chat. One more thing, perhaps I'll just say for Alicia is that in the wake of our NEH grant termination, we are a group of us led by Brandon Castle, who's a librarian and does Indigenous work at UMass, is leading up translating that environmental scan that we worked on for the grant into a paper that is sort of looking at both the Library of Congress task group on Indigenous subject headings and the work we've been doing in the Indigenous description group. And in that paper, we've got a pretty good landscape review on some of this work. And so we're excited to get that finished. And if you're interested in joining us as an author, we're an open group. So let us know.
Yeah, perhaps folks can email you, Diana.
Yeah, absolutely.
dmarsh@umd.edu. Feel free to put that in the chat.